UPSA Podcast presenta Aprendiendo Juntos, un espacio para conversar de diversos temas con docentes de la U, expertos invitados y personalidades.
Bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio de Aprendiendo Juntos, un podcast de la Universidad Privada de Santa Cruz de la Sierra, UPSA. En esta ocasión tendremos el podcast en inglés y ustedes tendrán los subtítulos en la parte de abajo. I am here with Dr. Lata McGinn. She is a professor of psychology at Yeshiva University in New York. She is the president of the World Confederation for Cognitive Behavioral Therapies, and she has done a lot of work that she will tell us now. So, dear Dr. Lata, thank you for joining us at the 20th conference of CLAMOC that is being held at the university right now. Thank you for coming to Bolivia, and thank you for accepting to be part of this podcast.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, delighted to be invited, and honored to be here in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and to meet all the delegates here.
Amazing. Well, this will be a kind of interview.
Yeah.
So we will share a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT,
Sure.
mental health, what are some of the challenges around the world, and of course your perspective with all the experience and knowledge that you have.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's start with this part of what is evidence-based therapy. What is a therapy?
Right. So a psychotherapy is a relationship between the person delivering the intervention and the person who is receiving it. It's a way of using talk to alleviate suffering. And so there are many ways to do that. You know, traditional healers have done that through religion. Evidence-based psychotherapy is basically psychotherapy that has been tested through rigorous controlled research studies to show that it works beyond just having two people in the room supporting each other, right? The idea is that are there certain things one does in psychotherapy that can be effective and we know works. So evidence-based psychotherapy simply means that.
Amazing. Well, I imagine that this happened around the world, but for example, during the pandemics, a lot of attention was paid to mental health,
Right.
more than before.
Right.
Did it happen around the world, and how did that happen?
Well, I think the mental health has been, mental ill health has been on the rise for many, many decades now. However, when the pandemic happened, it sort of was a tipping point when all the things that had been building up at that point just increased the problems people were experiencing. So even people who are not vulnerable to suffering from psychological conditions started to experience anxiety, depression, grief, and so on. So as a result, the numbers of people who were distressed and seeking help, I think, caught the attention of the public in a way that it hasn't before.
How is it for those that are viewing us and listening us right now? You're talking about distress and suffering and all that stuff, and usually, not usually, but it's common to relate these terms with spirituality, religion, and then we start talking about evidence and science and all that stuff. How are those worlds connected?
I think that, religion and spirituality are certainly wonderful avenues for people to get social support. We know social support works. We know that having the ability to have the wisdom of people in spirituality who've gained knowledge by doing it for so many years, that can also, they might be doing things that are effective. But I think working in tandem with evidence-based psychotherapy is also equally important, because then you know what not to do as well. So I think one way that the two could work together is by conversations and training. So I know at the university where I am, there's a lot of training of spiritual leaders in the university, so that they are learn evidence-based practice principles, so then they can translate that into people who may not seek mental health treatments. So that's one way they could really work well together.
So you don't have to be a researcher
Yes.
for doing evidence-based
Yes.
whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, you can
Yes.
consume
You can consume the research and learn how to do evidence-based practice.
amazingly. You're the president of the World Confederation for Cognitive Behavioral Therapies. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so first of all, let me start by defining what cognitive and behavioral therapies are. So CBT is a short acronym for it. And what that means is really not one thing. It's an umbrella of evidence-based psychotherapies that basically make change by looking at your thoughts, by looking at your emotions, and by looking at what you do when you're under stress or when you're going through life. And what it does is it basically makes change through that process. So by looking at your thoughts, by making change, it's rewiring your brain if you're suffering. By looking at your behaviors, it helps you to know what's adaptive ways of coping, what might harm you in the way that you cope. And so by making change in both of those avenues, it makes change in how you feel. So it's an umbrella of psychotherapies that have been shown to be effective for the vast number of illnesses that we see that are psychological in nature. So stress, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, eating disorders, schizophrenia. The range is pretty wide, and it's there for all ages, for people who come for therapy, for children in school, for people who are working in a business setting, right? So these principles have been used in all of these places. So we know that CBT works. The question is, how do you then connect the global community so that you can then spread the evidence base of CBT across the world, especially in areas of need? So there are lots of organizations of cognitive and behavioral therapies. The vast number are in more developed regions of the world. So the dream of having this World Confederation of CBT was to really provide a way for people all across the world to connect with each other through their organizations. And if there are regions where there are no CBT organizations, to help connect and grow it, and to grow these CBT organizations, because then the result is that the people in need get it. So for example, right now, the 3 priorities that I have as president are, one is to start a regional association of CBT in Africa, because that does not exist. We have Latin America represented on the World Confederation of CBT. We have Asia, we have Europe, we have North America, but we don't have Africa. So that is one of the key priorities in my presidency, because there's such a need in Africa, and yet they're not getting the benefit of evidence-based psychotherapy. And we know that the suffering in many regions of Africa is very intense, just like it is in Latin America, as an example. We also want to work with, the second priority is to work with governments across the world. And being part of the World Confederation of CBT allows us to interact with governments in order to help countries to make change in their mental health regulations, so that more people can benefit from CBT and evidence-based psychotherapy. And then finally, the third priority for my presidency has been to form a relationship with the World Health Organization. So the WCCBT, which is the acronym for the World Confederation of CBT, has signed an agreement, I'm so excited by that, signed an agreement with the World Health Organization last October, or should I say October 2023, and that became the beginning of a relationship. So we are helping to disseminate the work that the World Health Organization is doing, and they're doing such important work all across the world. We're also vetting their work on CBT. So when they come up with interventions that they want to test out, they approach us so that we can then vet the materials that they produce so that we can make sure that they follow the science. And so that has been extraordinary, I think, because I think then that puts evidence-based mental health on the world stage. And it allows us to give mental health the legitimacy it needs as a health profession. Because what is mental and what is physical are not so different, right?
We were speaking about evidence.
Yeah.
We were speaking, and that gives confidence for the rest of the world to understand what we are doing here.
Right.
But I understand that there's also a matter of society and economics, and a lot of factors involved in mental health, and a lot of factors of consequences of mental health as well. So working alongside with the World Health Organization, how has it been so far? I know it's short term, but
it has been really very nice. Sharing of ideas with the people in the World Health Organization has been very inspiring to see the work that they do, and allowing the professional community in CBT to learn what the World Health Organization is doing. And one of the things they're doing is they are eliminating brands of CBT. So they're using all the basic principles and using it not just to train people who have a PhD or a doctor of psychology, but to train consumers and lay people. And so let's say they're going into some regions of the world where there are not enough mental health professionals, but you can't just let them, support people without the evidence. So they're using these knowledge to train non-specialized professions as well, so that the reach of the field is very high.
I know that summarizing is also always difficult, but if I ask you to try and sum up the basic principles of evidence-based therapies or CBT,
what would that be?
What would that be?
I think basically what CBT does is it allows you to take negative experiences that people have, right? Having negative experiences, having the ups and downs of life are so common. And then there are some people who have a higher vulnerability because of their background and experiences. It allows you to reflect on your own experience. It teaches you to become an observer of your own experience. It teaches you to watch what you're thinking, and to help you gain new perspectives so that you can alleviate some suffering that you might be having. So, for example, if you've had negative things happen to you, it's a very easy to start judging yourself for having anxiety, for thinking that bad things will happen to you, and that you will never get better. Those are examples of the ways that thoughts can trap you into suffering. So it allows you to watch yourself think, and then gives you a better way to reflect on your experience, to become a critical thinker of your own experience, so that you can help not let your thoughts add to the suffering you're already experiencing. So that's a very powerful thing that CBT does. In addition, it teaches you that having emotions is okay. Emotions are there to alarm us. It's been built into our systems since the time our ancestors lived in more primitive environments. And so learning that emotions are not there to harm us, but they're there to protect us, is another very central tenet of CBT. So it allows you to take the emotion and say, well, what is the emotion asking me to do? Is it asking me to do something that's helpful or it's not helpful? And then it basically allowing you to say, if I feel something, rather than trying to stop thinking it, stop feeling it, how can I help that emotion to just gradually dissipate on its own or go down on its own? That's another central tenet of CBT. And then the third, which is related, is that the things that we do can add to our suffering or reduce our suffering. So if something is painful and we're sad, we might be inclined to stay at home and not engage with people. If we're anxious about doing something, we might have the urge to not put ourselves in situations where, let's say, we're with people, but we're afraid of talking to people, or we're afraid of doing something that is scary, like maybe public speaking, as an example. So it teaches you how to gradually face the things that you're afraid to do, because we know from research that the more you withdraw from life, the more you stop doing things that cause you pain, that ultimately it adds to your suffering, ironically, over the long term. It doesn't protect you. So CBT helps you to then build new skills and new behaviors so that you are skilled enough to do the behaviors, but also it teaches you how to gradually approach things that you're afraid of or that you're too sad to do, so that you can get better. So I think that in a nutshell would be the lessons of CBT.
An amazing explanation. You were talking about critical thinking during the explanation, and I was remembering, because I teach critical thinking at university, and sometimes I encounter some people that try to block their emotions, trying to think critically. Understanding that emotions will lead you to a bad decision, quoting bad decision. So they, and this is maybe an old model of looking at decisions, right? Trying to step aside all the emotions and just be reasonable, rational, right? But when you are talking about critical thinking and applying this to ourselves, then we have to accept that our emotions are real, even if what they are showing us is not real.
And even if the message is not real, right?
That's the process of being critical with ourselves,
Absolutely.
Well, amazing. So that could be therapeutic. That is a part of psychotherapy.
Yes, exactly. It allows you not to be afraid of your emotions, how not to be a victim to the emotion either, so that you're letting the emotion drive every decision. So it's like a combination of using your critical thinking, your thought, and your emotion to make wise decisions, right? That you are taking both the way that you think and the way that you feel into making an informed decision.
Is there any difference between a person that embraces these difficulties and the one that feels a victim, or?
Yeah, I think that when negative things happen to us, I think if you learn through CBT on how to become an active survivor, right, that is better for your recovery than, of course, victim just means something happened to you, but how do you take that and become an active survivor in the future? And that is to take the principles of CBT not to make it worse for yourself. So if something bad has happened to you, let's say you didn't get something you wanted, you didn't get into college, or you had something even worse happen to you, something bad, you can make it worse by saying, these things only happen to me, or the fact that this happened to me means I'm a loser, and so, or other people have it better. So the dialogue that you have in your brain can really make it worse. So if you learn how to change that perspective and see and gain new insights, it's just better for your recovery.
This is amazing in terms of understanding what we can do. After the pandemics, after all the events that are happening, with all the conflicts in the social media, the news, it's like the world is going towards a point of conflict all the time. Each week we have a new conflict around, and then when we start talking about mental health, sometimes it looks like, or it could look like, what are you talking about? There is a lot of problems out there. There is a lot of things happening. How can you start talking about acceptance and living well and all that stuff? But that's not disconnected.
Yes.
On the contrary, it's completely
very connected. Exactly. Because when bad things happen to us, that's the time your mental health is affected the most. So knowing what can help you, you're already going through something difficult. if you learn techniques to help yourself suffer less, what could be better, right? It doesn't discount the fact that you're having bad things happening, but it helps you to not just accept them, but to how to build skills that will actually put you at a way to cope better with that adversity.
And when you're talking about skills, the first thing that comes to my mind is schools. That's the best way of preventing and generating skills before going to therapy is developing skills at schools or with children and all that stuff. How is it going around the world? Are we managing to develop emotional skills before therapy, or?
I'm glad you asked that. Like, one of the things that I'm doing right now in my research is I've developed a social emotional curriculum, which is a universal prevention for kids in high school. So they are learning CBT principles in a classroom setting with teachers. And ultimately, my dream would be to start this in kindergarten, just to know, because it's interesting. The research shows that even learning how to label your emotions puts you at a better position. So what these high school students are learning is the principles that I mentioned, and they're learning it as part of a class. And then we're following them every year, so until they graduate. And so the goal would be that this becomes just like other subjects you learn. You know, you learn health, you learn math, you learn English, and you learn skills to be resilient. What could be better, right?
What a strong word, resilience. Yeah. You have dedicated yourself to studying trauma and all the ways of overcoming it, and then resilience is a word that you I imagine that you use very often.
Sure.
In terms of conflict, there will always be a conflict. But also in terms of conditions, because, for example, in Latin America, or especially in South America, we are always struggling with the conditions of living. Maybe we are really happy in general and kind, but it's true also that the conditions that we live in are not the best. How is this connected? What do you think? Or what can we do as society for improving in these terms?
I think that's when the need for resilience is even greater, because the more adversity you face, it becomes more challenging to remain resilient. And that's when you need to be resilient. So the schools that I'm implementing this protocol, the program, this universal CBT program, is 2 schools in Harlem in New York, which is one of the poorest sections of New York City. And these are kids who are facing adversity that is beyond imagination. Many of them are immigrants. They don't have food in the house. They may not have 2 parents. They are living in an area where there are gangs. And, you know, there are lots of opportunities to use drugs. So they're facing strong adversity. And so having tools like this puts them with such strength, so that they can, it doesn't say you're not experiencing that adversity. It's saying because you're experiencing adversity, you need these tools to help yourself remain resilient. So
it's not about the things that happen to you, it's what you do with the things that happen to you.
Exactly.
But with more details and well developed and all that stuff. Lata, if you could send a message, this will be on the internet. Hopefully, a lot of professionals will see this recording or listen to us on the podcast. What would it be?
I mean, I would say it's like the field of mental health and psychology is such an important field, and the need is so great that if you're even considering a profession or you're in the profession, I think being trained in doing cognitive and behavioral therapies is so imperative to get the proper training to do it, so that you can make the difference in the world. You know, despite the fact that we know that CBT works, there are not enough therapists trained in it in the world. So I think that is a moral imperative for those of us who know CBT to help with that movement to get more people involved. So I would say if you're thinking of entering the field of mental health, it's a noble profession. It's a very, you feel that you're making a difference in the lives of people. And then to get appropriate training in CBT is what I would encourage your viewers to do.
And what about the professionals that are not part of this area, that they are not psychiatrists or psychologists or care workers and mental care workers or whatever, mental health care workers? Is there a message for them too?
Yeah, I mean, I would say be open to the field, because if you have if you have asthma, you go to a medical doctor. That if you have stress, if you have anxiety, depression, if you're suffering, to reach out and see if you can work with a CBT therapist to get better, because there's a lot of stigma about mental health. People are often ashamed to go for therapy. You wouldn't be ashamed if you had asthma to go to a doctor. It's the same thing, that when you have mental health needs, to be open to going to get help, because I think what mental health needs is sunlight. And I think you need to spread it out into the open so that it is an open conversation. And if you have needs, to really seek treatment rather than to suffer.
Would you say it's possible to apply the CBT principles, for example, in businesses or organizations?
Yep.
Are leaders from these organizations able to do something with their organizations with these principles?
Yes.
How would that work?
I mean, it's amazing. CBT has been applied to so many different settings, outpatient, inpatient, businesses, agencies. So the other organizations I'm a part of, Cognitive and Behavioral Consultants, we train people. So we're right now in 100 schools in the United States, training them to do CBT and DBT. And in addition, we work with businesses who want help for their employees. I mean, you can really get this help anywhere. So in the U.S., you have this employee assistance programs where if you infuse that with CBT principles, then employees get the help they need. And again, it's out in the open.
Sure.
So there's so many ways that CBT could be delivered all over in the world.
Amazing. Lata, I want to thank you for being here, for joining us to the conference, and for contributing not just to the formation of cognitive behavioral therapists or evidence-based therapists in Bolivia and in South America, but with all these conversations and all the work that you're doing with the World Confederation as well, to spread the word around the societies, because this is not about institutions. It's not about academic development. It's about people, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
for
about people.
You coming to Bolivia, doing the podcast, presenting at that conference, keeping in touch, really helps us to get new information, more information, to be critical about it as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And to keep on improving. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking and getting to know you, Nico. You're doing such important work in CBT here. I know you're the president of the Bolivian Association of CBT, and that's such a wonderful way of then bringing in students and professionals who are interested in getting training. I know you're working at the university as well, inspiring and mentoring students to become critical thinkers. And I know that there's postgraduate training available in CBT. So I think the field in Bolivia is rich and strong. I think there's such exciting adventures ahead for the field in Bolivia and, of course, all across Latin America.
Thank you so much. We are doing our best to keep the effort. We understand the value of research.
Yes.
Because we need to understand the data, listen to it, and take informed decisions on what we are doing.
Right.
But it's also true that we are trying to pass this to the students, right?
Yes.
The students are the ones that are doing
future
research.
generation, right.
They are trying to publish, to write it down, because at the same time, when they are doing research, they have to read. So that's the way
Yes.
of getting them active on
Yeah.
the updates and the new knowledge and everything. So thank you very much. I hope that we stay in contact.
We would love to do that. Absolutely.
It would be amazing to do an in cross-cultural research or whatever
be
like that.
fantastic. That would be
We
amazing.
will talk about it, right?
All right.
So thank you very much, Lata. Thank you everyone for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.